I walked into the Marrow workshop, and the sharp smell of alchemy hit me immediately. "Good morning," I said. Silco looked up from the corner, dark circles under his eyes so thick, he looked half dead. He glared at me like I was a slave driver. Which, to be fair, I kind of was. "Morning, my lord," he muttered, and handed me a rough clay pot about the size of a fist. A strip of linen stuck out of the top as a fuse. It looked like something a child made out of mud. "This is it." I raised an eyebrow. "Don't judge the outside," he said lazily. "Inside it's packed with magic marrow, crushed ice-armored bear crystal, and fire tinder grass. It hits hard. Give me more time, and I could make something even stronger and prettier. Let's test one." The testing field was already set up. Several magical beasts were tied down in different spots, thrashing and growling. Knights put on protective masks, lit the fuse, and threw the bomb. The clay pot spun through the air and smashed right in the center. Phase 1, Cold Blast. The bear crystal shattered and released a wave of extreme cold. The air contracted violently, like an invisible hand crushing everything inward. The beast's fur froze instantly. Their limbs seized up. Then the suction dragged them toward the blast center. They howled and clawed at the ground, but couldn't break free. Phase 2, Fire Burst. The magic marrow ignited. Flames erupted, and the fire tinder grass devoured all the oxygen. The fire didn't just burn. It clung to the beasts like liquid, crawling along their fur, burrowing into every crack in their skin. One beast's eyes burst from the heat, body fluid turning to steam. The stench of charred flesh filled the air. Phase 3, Toxic Rot. Black smoke rose from the remains. This wasn't ordinary ash. It was poisonous gas released by burning marrow. The surviving beasts convulsed, their wounds rotting open in seconds, flesh dissolving down to white bone. They thrashed, screamed, rolled, then went still. When the smoke cleared, nothing was left but charred remains half buried in scorched earth. The soil itself had turned dark brown, faintly glowing. The ground looked like death had soaked into it. I stood there in silence for a long time. Siv was pale, fists clenched. She'd seen battle before, even fought and won herself. But she'd never seen anything like this. Killing that was total, silent, and left nothing behind. Silco wore a strange expression, half proud and half pained. He rubbed his bloodshot eyes and sore neck. "The power is impressive. But my lord, each one of these costs 400 gold coins in materials." He stared at the scorched field like he was watching a pile of gold coins burn. It clearly hurt him more than the beasts. "How many do we have left?" I asked. 7, he sighed. "That's it. You only brought so much bear crystal. What's the name?" "Haven't thought of one." I looked across the dead, still burning ground and smiled slightly. "Call it Ice and Fire." Silco nodded. "Fair enough." I patted the rough surface of one of the remaining bombs. 7 of these. My last resort, my hidden ace. Meanwhile, in Snow Eagle City, Count Rivers sat in his fancy chair, nervously rubbing his fat chin. Damn it. Led a campaign against the Snowsworn? I don't know the first thing about commanding troops. He'd only inherited his title 2 years ago when his father, a legendary northern general who'd terrorized the barbarian tribes for decades, passed it down. The son was nothing like the father. He was an overweight man who could barely stay on a horse, let alone lead soldiers into battle. His military advisor leaned in with a calculating look. "My lord, this could actually be an opportunity," Rivers frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Southern Pioneer Lords," the advisor whispered. "They're weak. No real roots here. Send them to handle the most dangerous parts of the campaign. Let the Snowsworn chew through their forces. Once they're destroyed, you step in as the ranking noble and absorb their territories and resources. Everyone wins, except them." Rivers blinked. "You can do that?" The advisor pressed harder. "The northern nobles already hate those southern outsiders. If they all get wiped out, the north goes back to northern hands. And those people who think you're just riding on your father's name, they'll have to admit you're the real ruler of Snow Peak County." Rivers was quiet for a moment. Then a cruel smile spread across his face. "Good. Do it." He lifted his wine glass and swirled it gently, already imagining the southern lords buried in snow and ice, and himself standing above it all, admired by everyone. I didn't know any of this yet, but I was about to walk right into it. The day of departure arrived. The streets of Red Tide territory were packed with people who came out on their own to see us off. I rode at the front in my black and red cloak with the Calvin family crest on my shoulder. Behind me marched 8 elite knights, 25 full knights, 60 apprentice knights, and 200 infantry, every one of them armed and ready. Even by northern standards, this was a serious fighting force. I was taking more than half of Red Tide Territory's military strength with me. It was a calculated risk. Our territory sat in the safer southern part of the north, so even with fewer defenders, we wouldn't face much danger. And my daily intelligence system would warn me of any threats before they hit. So I brought as many troops as I could. I wanted to earn real achievements in this campaign and put Red Tide Territory's name on the map among the northern nobility. Bell stood in the crowd, watching with envy. He'd awakened his battle aura, but he was too young and his skills too raw. I left him behind to keep training. I could see in his eyes how badly he wanted to ride out with us. That's far enough, I told the crowd, pulling my horse to a stop. No matter what enemy waits ahead, we'll come back victorious. I pulled the reins. Move out, hooves thundered. Banners caught the wind. The people's cheers echoed behind us as we left. I departed early on purpose. The other lords would probably show up at the last possible moment, and I didn't need to be the eager one standing around waiting. Instead, I used the extra travel time for something more useful, hunting. Every morning, I'd check my intelligence system and casually point in a direction. There should be magical beasts over there today. Let's take a look. And sure enough, we'd find them. Wasteland boars, cracked horn antelope, iron feather wolves. Nothing too dangerous for my knights, but the meat was solid and full of energy. At first, the knights were amazed at my uncanny luck. After a few days, they stopped questioning it and just accepted that I was blessed by the dragon ancestor, and they were lucky to be along for the ride. Our routine became march in the morning, hunt at midday, roast meat over campfires at night. Eat well, sleep well. The soldiers couldn't believe it. Back home, their best meals were black bread and salted fish. Now they were feasting on fresh magical beast meat every evening. This is better than training back at the territory, one soldier laughed, raising his drink. It felt less like a military campaign and more like a spring picnic. I looked around at my men, laughing, carving meat with daggers, boiling bone soup, passing around drinks, and shook my head with a smile. Fine. Rest now, fight later. Then a knight jogged over. My lord, we've spotted Baron Yorn's group approaching from the east. I pictured that round little figure instantly. Of course, his territory was nearby, and he'd been summoned to Snow Eagle City too. Before long, hooves pounded in the distance. Boss, there he was. Yorn jumped off his horse and ran toward me, beaming. I blinked. He'd actually lost some weight. The perfect sphere had become more of an oval. Still a fat guy, but progress was progress. Then his eyes locked onto the roasting meat behind me. His throat bobbed. The sound of him swallowing was embarrassingly loud in the quiet night air. I tore off a piece of roast meat and held it out. Want some? He nodded like a maniac, eyes glowing. He grabbed it and took a massive bite, pure bliss spreading across his face. The smell of roasting meat filled the camp as Yorn devoured everything in sight. I haven't had fresh magical beast meat in forever, he moaned between bites, half crying, half chewing. Looking at him, I could see the north had taken its toll. The confident, round-faced kid who arrived months ago was thinner now, with a worn-out look about him. Then the complaints started pouring out. His land was frozen solid. Crops wouldn't grow. His people were lazy and helpless. They couldn't farm, couldn't hunt, and just waited around for him to hand out food like he was running a charity. If my dad wasn't sending money and grain from the south every month, I'd have starved to death by now, he said, pulling at his hair dramatically. I went quiet for a moment. The fact that the Harvey family could afford to feed an entire territory through supply shipments from the south gave me a new appreciation for just how rich they were. Yorn sighed and looked up at the sky. I should never have come. Think my dad could ask the emperor to let me go home. I almost laughed. You can't just leave. Under the expansion decree, abandoning your territory gets you executed. You're stuck here for at least 20 years. His face went completely blank with despair. Then he switched topics. And just when I finally got seeds in the ground, Edmund's order comes in and I have to march off to war. I might not even have a harvest this fall. He jabbed his meat skewer into the fire angrily. This should be the northern nobles' fight. Why drag us newcomers into it? Against the snow-sworn of all people. Those guys are insane. That's exactly the point, I said, shrugging. New pioneer lords with no backing and no roots make the perfect cannon fodder. Yorn's smile froze. He got it. After a pause, he shook it off and changed the subject. Hey, do you know Zachary Diaz? From the Diaz family? His territory is nearby, right? Yeah. He sent out invitations to all the southern pioneer lords in Snow Peak County. Wants to throw a pre-campaign banquet and bring everyone together. Yorn waved his meat stick. Did you get one? I paused, then shook my head. Yorn looked confused. What? But it's simple, I said with a dry laugh, turning the meat on the fire. Zachary wants to be the leader of the Southern Pioneers. Having me there ruins that. Yorn blinked. The Diaz family is one of the Empire's 8 great houses, same as the Calvins, I explained. If I show up, he can't play king. So he left me out. Yorn's eyes went wide with understanding. Oh, right, you're both from top families. He can't act all high and mighty with you around. He paused and muttered, what a petty guy. Not petty, just smart enough to know his own limits. So what are you going to do? When's the banquet? Where? 2 days from now, at his territory. Not far from here. I stood up and brushed the dust off my clothes. Take me there. Yorn's eyes lit up. Boss, are you going to crash his party? I smiled. We've got time. Let's just go have a look. The next day, Yorn led the way. After half a day of riding, we arrived at Zachary's territory. What I saw was pretty bleak. Thin, poor soil with a few scraggly fields. Flimsy wooden houses, some with holes in the roof. The residents wore ragged clothes and moved with empty expressions. No fear, no hope, just numbness. I frowned. Back in Red Tide territory, a place like this would be torn down and rebuilt from scratch. But then Yorn crossed his arms and nodded approvingly. This guy's doing pretty well. Only slightly worse than mine. I stared at him, wondering if I'd heard wrong. I looked at the crumbling houses, the barren fields, the hollow-eyed people. Then it hit me. This was normal. This was what most pioneer territories in the north actually looked like. No resources, no planning, no steady supply lines. In this frozen wasteland, keeping your people alive and getting a few buildings up counted as success. Red Tide territory's prosperity wasn't normal at all. It looked nothing like a new settlement. It was better than territories that had existed for generations. And the only reason was me, a transmigrator with a cheat system that told me where resources were, where dangers lurked, and how to make the most of everything. Without that, I'd probably be in the same boat as everyone else. I turned to Yorn. After we deal with the Snow Sworn, come visit Red Tide territory. It's quite a bit better than this. He nodded without hesitation. Obviously, you're my boss. The banquet hall was trying hard to look noble. Gold-trimmed banners on the walls, carved furniture, a whole roasted wasteland boar as the main dish. But the exposed ceiling beams, faded carpet, and rough craftsmanship told the real story. Zachary Diaz was putting on a show with limited resources. He sat in the center surrounded by 6 or 7 Southern Pioneer lords, all falling over themselves to flatter him. Diaz, sir, this gathering is so important. We Southerners need to stick together against these northern barbarians. With you leading us, we finally have a chance. Zachary played it cool, sipping wine shipped from the south, soaking up every compliment. He'd managed to gather most of the Southern Pioneer lords in Snow Peak County. That proved his influence. These lords were isolated, weak, and desperate for a protector, and the Diaz family name was the best option they had. His real plan was simple. Get them under his control, form a power block, and quietly arrange for anyone who wouldn't obey to end up on the front lines as sacrificial pawns. He'd suggest to Count Rivers who should lead the most dangerous charges. Every battle needs bodies. As for me, Zachary saw my family name as a threat, but didn't think much of me personally. Just some highborn nobody who couldn't even get invited to a banquet. He probably figured I was already dead in some frozen ditch. Then I pushed the door open and walked in, Yorn right behind me. The room went still. Zachary's face twitched, but he recovered fast and put on a polished smile. I looked around the room. What a gathering. A bunch of small fish pretending to be sharks. What's wrong? Not welcome? I said with a slight grin. Zachary stood up with fake warmth. Lord Calvin. Welcome. Welcome. I strolled to the table casually. You mentioned there was a party, so I thought I'd drop by after dinner. I glanced at the roasted boar. This is the main course. Yorn, zero shame as always, grabbed a piece of meat, bit into it, and frowned. Average. Worse than what we feed our slaves, actually. Dead silence. A few lords looked uncomfortable. Others suddenly found their drinks very interesting. Zachary's smile tightened but held. Lord Calvin's presence truly brightens the occasion. I wouldn't go that far, I said, pulling up a chair. I'm just curious why I didn't get an invitation. My servant must have overlooked it, he said smoothly. I chuckled. No matter. I showed up anyway. He quickly changed direction. Since you're here, why not join us on the march to Snow Eagle City? We Southern pioneers need to unite, or the Northern nobles will eat us alive. I tilted my head. Oh, and you're volunteering to lead this little alliance? His smile froze for just a second. Not at all. I simply think cooperation benefits everyone. I scanned the room, looking at each face, then settled back on Zachary. Sure, cooperation is great. The real question is who charges first, who hangs back, and who makes the calls. I pointed at the roasted boar on the table. Like this pig, who cuts first, who eats last. There are rules. The other lords exchanged glances. The mood was shifting. Zachary's expression cooled. What exactly are you saying, Lord Calvin? Nothing complicated, I said, setting down my cup. Just that you don't get to decide. Silence. Zachary tried again. Fighting the snow sworn is dangerous. Banding together protects all of us. Absolutely, I said, smiling slightly. And as members of the Empire's 8 great families, we should be the first ones on the battlefield, right? I paused. Unless you were planning to let everyone else do the fighting while you wait to collect the prizes? The air in the room turned heavy. The other lord's eyes slowly drifted toward Zachary. His knuckles whitened around his wine glass, but his smile stayed glued on. You misunderstand me, Lord Calvin. We should focus on the real enemy, not fight among ourselves. Agreed, I said, standing up and straightening my clothes. But your approach makes people nervous. I headed for the door. The wine was decent. The food was average. The people, I pretended to think it over. About the same. The whole visit lasted maybe 15 minutes. Just an after-dinner stroll, exactly like I said. Jorn grabbed one last piece of meat on the way out. Waste is a sin, he mumbled through a full mouth, then followed me outside. The door closed. Cold wind cut through the silence I left behind. I didn't need to look back to know Zachary's face had gone dark, and I knew every lord in that room was now wondering if maybe the Diaz kid wasn't quite the leader they'd been looking for. I walked out of the banquet hall into the cold night air and let out a breath. That whole thing was even more boring than I expected. Zachary Diaz was exactly what I thought. A guy who believed some pretty words and small favors could make people die for him. But I'd planted the seed of doubt. Those lords were already starting to wonder. Was Zachary really looking out for everyone, or just himself? Once that question gets in someone's head, it doesn't go away. Jorn caught up to me, practically bouncing with excitement. Boss, that was amazing. You should have seen Zachary's face. It went completely green. I bet he wants to murder you right now. Too bad he doesn't have the guts, I said. Jorn started doing impressions of Zachary, lifting his chin and pretending to hold a wine glass. Oh, Lord Calvin, unity is so important. Then he dropped the act and waved his hand. Disgusting, I laughed. He was good at this. But I didn't let myself get too pleased. This was only the beginning. If Zachary was smart, he'd try to repair his image, maybe even twist the story to make me look bad. If he was stupid, he'd go straight for revenge. Either way, I needed to stay sharp. Hey boss, you think he'll send people after you? Jorn whispered. I looked around at the soldiers and knights stationed outside the hall, belonging to the various pioneer lords. Their armor was dented, weapons rusty, horses underfed. Some soldiers were huddled in corners trying to stay warm, others leaning against walls with blank stares. The guards on duty could barely stand straight. Jorn, what do you think of these troops? I asked. He looked around and burst out laughing. Yeah, they're pretty terrible. His own forces weren't much better, but he'd just seen mine the day before. My knight's armor was polished, weapons sharp, horses well-fed and strong. Even my regular infantry could execute formations on command. The difference was night and day. I understood why Zachary had been able to gather these lords so easily. It wasn't about strength, it was about their shared situation. Every one of them had been thrown away by their families, sent north to satisfy the emperor's expansion decree. Nobody expected them to succeed. They were disposable. I knew, because I'd been one of them. The difference was that I'd clawed my way up with knowledge from my past life and my intelligence system. My father saw results and invested more. What started as a wasteland was now a real territory with a real army. Yearn leaned closer. Boss, I don't mean he'll attack you directly. I mean he'll go tattling to Count Rivers about you. I scoffed. Let him. I've already got a plan for that. I pulled my reins and grinned. Come on, gather your knights. I'm going to help you earn some war merits. War merits? He blinked. Wait, what are you planning? I kicked my horse forward without answering. Hey, boss, at least explain. Wait for me. He scrambled after me, and together we rode back toward camp with our knights. Far away in the mountains, the snow-sworn leader hero sat in his tent, fingers tapping the table, staring at a piece of intelligence. Duke Edmund is gathering all northern lords for a campaign to destroy the snow-sworn. He read it over and over, a wild light growing in his eyes. Finally, his voice came out rough and broken. He looked at his trembling hands, the same hands that had buried his mother all those years ago. Memories of pain flooded back, but instead of tears, he laughed. Low at first, then louder, almost unhinged. It's time. Time for blood to pay for blood. Then a cold gust of wind ripped through the tent flap. Hero's laughter stopped dead. His body went stiff. A soft male voice spoke behind him, calm and soothing. Don't rush, Hero. He spun around. In the flickering candlelight, a slender, elegant hand rested on his shoulder. The fingertips were ice cold, completely without warmth. The eerie voice continued. The ritual to awaken the ancient god of the cold abyss is not yet complete. Wind howled across the ridge as Yorn and I lay flat behind the rocks, watching the empty canyon below. Boss, are you sure Snowsworn are really going to come through here? Yorn whispered. We'd left before dawn, brought our knights and soldiers into this maze of narrow passages, and spent the entire day setting up. Steel-hooked trip lines buried under dirt and gravel in the tight spots. Boulders rigged on the cliff tops, ready to roll with one good push. I personally checked every position. I even planned 3 different escape routes. This wasn't supposed to be a slug fight. It was an ambush. Ideally, 0 casualties on our side. If anything went wrong, we'd pull out clean. But by sunset, the canyon was still dead empty. Not even a bird. Yorn started fidgeting. Boss, what if your intel was bad? What if we've been? Shut up, I said without turning around. Oh, he went quiet. They're almost here, I added. My confidence came from my intelligence system. 3 days ago, it had told me. 30 snow-sworn elite warriors would pass through the northern entrance of White Feather Canyon tonight. Yorn was crouching behind a rock, staring at nothing, smacking his lips with boredom. He was about to complain again when a faint sound drifted up from the canyon floor. Hoofbeats. Not one horse. A whole column. His eyes went huge. Are you kidding me? They're actually here. He scrambled flat behind his rock, face full of disbelief. Boss, you can see the future? I ignored him and watched the canyon entrance. They came through the north gap in near silence. Dark leather armor, iron shoulder plates, most of their upper bodies exposed and muscular. They carried a mix of heavy axes, long spears, and even some stolen imperial lances. Every one of them had the cold, sharp eyes of a killer. Silent, alert, radiating danger. These weren't ordinary snow-sworn bandits. These were trained elite warriors, each one roughly equal to a mid-level full knight in the Empire's ranking system. They were on a mission to ambush a gathering noble force. A quick, brutal strike, the kind they'd done dozens of times before. The lead warrior reined in his horse and scanned the terrain ahead. Too quiet, he murmured. Another one grinned. Relax. Those noble brats just started assembling. We're here to give them a welcome gift. Then the lead horse stepped forward and the tripwire snapped tight. Iron hooks shot up from the dirt like snakes, tangling around the horse's legs. The animal lurched forward, dragging its rider. Nearby horses reared and screamed. One man crashed off his mount and rolled through the dust. Metal hooks bit into armor with a horrible scraping sound. Blood seeped from the horse's legs. Brief chaos. Dust everywhere. Hooves pounding in all directions. But these warriors recovered in seconds. They vaulted off their horses, rolled on impact, drew weapons, turned, and formed a defensive ring, all in one fluid motion. No screaming, no panic. Just cold efficiency. Trap, the leader said quietly. From trigger to formation, maybe 5 seconds. Archers in the center aimed at both cliff walls while the rest locked shields, swords, axes, and spears into a tight circle. Without a single spoken command, they'd switched from travelers to killers. Their leader drew a greatsword. Prepare for contact. That's when I gave the order from above. Now, stone wheels turned. Release mechanisms fired. Massive boulders roared down the cliff face along preset channels, picking up terrifying speed. Above, someone screamed. Too late. The first boulder, big as a wagon wheel, slammed into their formation. One warrior couldn't dodge. His heavy armor crumpled like paper as the rock launched him into the canyon wall. Blood painted the stone. More boulders crashed down like hammers from the sky. Horses shrieked. Armor cracked. Shrapnel flew everywhere. Dust swallowed the canyon floor. Hold formation, the captain roared through the haze. These weren't amateurs. Even under a boulder barrage, they kept their discipline. Experienced fighters read the terrain fast, shifting the group away from the main drop zone, preventing a total collapse. They were shaken but far from broken. Through the settling dust, the captain's eyes swept the cliffs, cold and calculating. He knew this was just the opening move. The real fight was about to begin. The thundering of hooves shook the canyon as my knights burst from the dust cloud. The snow-sworn captain, Haskell, snapped his head up and immediately barked orders. His warriors raised shields, leveled spears, and gripped axes, alert, disciplined, ready. These weren't amateurs. But my knights didn't give them a second to breathe. The first squad launched the opening move. A rain of javelins and arrows poured down on the snow-sworn formation. One young warrior was a beat too slow raising his shield. A javelin punched clean through his chest. He stumbled back, coughed up bloody foam, and dropped dead. Before the snow-sworn could regroup, my first squad had already pulled out, kicking up a wall of dust behind them to block the enemy's vision. Then the second squad hit from the flank. Horses screaming, lances blazing with red battle aura, they sliced into the side of the formation. Their main attack is coming from the side, a snow-sworn fighter shouted, and several warriors instinctively shifted to meet it. Don't move. It's a feint, Haskell screamed, but too late. That was exactly the point. The flank charge wasn't the real attack. It was meant to break their formation open. And it worked. My knights carved through the gap, lances and swords flashing crimson. A warrior's throat was pierced clean through. In seconds, the defensive line was torn apart. Haskell's face twisted with rage as he finally understood. This wasn't a battle. This was a hunt. And his men were the prey. Then Lambert appeared, leading the third squad, elite knights and high-ranking full knights. He exploded out of the dust at terrifying speed. One snow-sworn warrior didn't even have time to raise his weapon before a lance wrapped in burning red aura punched through his chest and pinned him to the ground. The aura kept burning inside his wound even after he was dead. Haskell roared and swung his battle axe with everything he had, dark blue aura erupting around him. Lambert caught the blow on his lance. Red and blue aura collided in a shockwave that cracked the ground and sent nearby fighters stumbling. Not bad, Lambert said coolly, then whipped his lance sideways and slashed the throat of a snow-sworn warrior trying to sneak up from behind. The fight ground on, but it was one-sided. My knights kept hitting and pulling back, never getting bogged down. The snow-sworn were bleeding out fast. Soon more than half of them were dead or down. Haskell knelt in the dirt, wheezing like a bellows. His axe was chipped and cracked. His armor was shattered and soaked in blood, his and others. Only about a dozen of his warriors were still standing, legs shaking, eyes glazed with exhaustion. Is this the end? He growled through clenched teeth. He dug his nails into his palms until pain snapped him alert. No, not yet. He rose slowly and looked at his remaining fighters. Snow-sworn. Fight to the last man. Make them pay in blood. Fight to the last. Blood for blood. They roared back, battered but burning with desperate fury. Then Haskell took a deep breath and raised his axe. A blood-red symbol blazed to life on his chest. Not ordinary battle aura, but something darker. A life-burning curse called boiling blood. His veins bulged under his skin. His muscles swelled grotesquely. His eyes turned to crimson fire. Blood poured from his ears, nose, and mouth. Every one of the remaining snow-sworn activated the same curse simultaneously. Their power exploded upward. A wave of murderous intent so thick it made the air itself tremble. Haskell laughed wildly, blood streaming down his face, and charged straight at Lambert with his axe raised high. Come, let me show you the hatred of the snow sworn. We'll drag you to hell with us. Fall back, Lambert shouted immediately. My knights scattered, but some of them weren't fast enough. The battle raged on below. Lambert and Haskell clashed again, but this time Haskell was in full boiling blood mode, a raging beast that felt no pain. He swung his axe so hard it cracked Lambert's chest armor and forced him back several steps. Lambert didn't try to match him head-on. He used his speed and footwork to keep distance and buy time. The other snow-sworn warriors were inspired by their captain's fury. They all activated boiling blood and charged my knights like madmen. My riders pulled back into formation fast, but one young knight got careless. An axe caught him square in the chest and sent him flying into a stone wall. His spine snapped. Dead on impact. Lambert's face darkened when he saw it. The fight was already won, but if they kept trading blows with these berserkers, more knights would die for nothing. Spread out. Don't engage, he ordered. My knights switched tactics immediately. They pulled back on horseback, circling at a distance, using javelins and arrows to poke at the enemy without getting close. It was the right call. Boiling blood couldn't last. Sure enough, the snow sworn started falling apart. Their skin split open. Blood poured from their mouths. Their war cries turned to screams. Some collapsed and convulsed on the ground. Others kept fighting through the agony, but their aura was spiraling out of control, killing them even faster. Lambert held the line and waited. Haskell was the last one standing. His muscles were tearing apart, blood running down the axe handle to his fingertips. His eyes had lost focus, but his legs still carried him forward. Follow me, he roared one final time and threw himself at Lambert. This time Lambert didn't retreat. He planted his horse and raised his lance. Axe met lance in midair. The axe blade shattered. Lambert's lance punched straight through Haskell's chest. But Haskell didn't fall. He lunged forward and grabbed Lambert with both arms, his aura going wild, ready to self-destruct and take Lambert with him. A knight rushed in from the side, swung his sword, and severed Haskell's right arm. The force blasted him away. He crashed onto the ground, aura scattering, and lay on his back staring up at the blood-red sunset. Father, I never could. He closed his eyes before finishing the sentence. Silence fell over the battlefield. Up on the cliff, Yorn's mouth was hanging open. He'd lost count of how many times he'd been shocked today. The whole fight, from the ambush, to the falling boulders, to the three-wave cavalry assault, played out like a scripted performance. Every move precise, every soldier in perfect sync. And it was over in less than 30 minutes. Boss, how did you even do this? He stammered. Can you see the future? Do you have a spy inside the snow sworn? Shut up, I said. I looked down at my knights cleaning up the field. One knight died. That means this ambush wasn't a complete success. Yorn stared at me like I'd lost my mind. His first thought was probably that I was showing off. But he didn't dare say it. Then I could see reality sinking in as he thought it through. If he or Zachary had run into these snow-sworn warriors without preparation, without the traps, without the tactics, without knowing they were coming, their knights would have been ground into paste before they could even react. This was the enemy they'd all be facing soon. Duke Edmund was sending the Southern Pioneer Lord straight into a meat grinder. Yorn's face went pale as he swallowed hard. He suddenly stood up, dusted himself off, straightened his back, and turned to me with a dead serious expression. Boss, do you need money? I glanced at him. He shut his mouth immediately but stayed right at my side, chest out, chin up, wearing his best, I am your most loyal follower, face. I stood at the cliff's edge looking down at the blood-soaked canyon. Even though we'd won, I felt a chill run through me. Without my intelligence system warning me 3 days in advance, without having time to dig in traps and plan the ambush perfectly, there was no way we could have won this cleanly. Boiling blood was terrifying. If every future fight meant dealing with berserkers like these, I needed to find a better counter, fast. Footsteps approached from below. Lambert walked up, blood on his armor, a gash across his shoulder, but his expression calm as ever. He knelt on one knee. My lord, battle is over. All enemies eliminated. I nodded. Good work, Lambert. Just doing my duty, he said quietly. Then, what do we do with the bodies? I looked down at the blood-stained valley floor. My voice came out cold and flat. Cut off their heads. Every single one. Wash them clean and bag them up. I'm sending them to Count Rivers as a gift. While I was still on the road, The grand assembly banquet was already underway at Snow Eagle City. Count Rivers had gone all out. The banquet hall glittered with hundreds of magic crystal lights hanging from the high ceiling. Gold-threaded tapestries covered every wall, each embroidered with the Rivers family crest. Silk tablecloths, silver utensils, crystal glasses. Roasted snow mountain deer dripping with fat, an entire rack of snow rock bear ribs piled on silver platters, and southern grape wine. Nearly impossible to find this far north, flowing freely into every cup. The display was extravagant even by southern standards. For the resource-starved north, it was almost obscene. Several of the old northern nobles frowned the moment they walked in. Rivers himself sat at the head table like a giant meatball stuffed into gold silk robes, his fat neck bulging over the collar, magic crystal rings squeezing every finger red. He laughed like a drunk pig, soaking up the flattery pouring in from every direction. The southern pioneer lords crowded around him, competing to outdo each other with compliments. Your lordship's brilliance will make the north prosper. Without your guidance, we'd be completely lost. One even said he had the bearing of a crown prince. Another claimed he could make the north great again. Rivers ate it all up, laughing so hard he choked on his wine and spat half of it out. But the praise that really sent him over the edge came from Zachary Diaz. Lord Rivers, your coordination of this assembly is exemplary. Even my father would feel inadequate by comparison. Coming from a member of one of the Empire's 8 great families, that one line made Rivers practically float off his chair. Meanwhile, in a dark corner of the hall, a group of old northern nobles sat in grim silence. These were Rivers' family veterans, men who'd fought alongside the previous count across frozen plains, hunted magical beasts, and crushed barbarian tribes. Now they watched their old master's son get puppet by smooth-talking southern flatterers, and it made their blood boil. If the old lord were alive, he'd have kicked this table over, the eldest general muttered. Have you ever seen any of those southerners hold a sword? Another sneered. Their armor shines like stage costumes. Not a single scar between them. They tried to guide the young count, offered to train his troops, handle military affairs, even do the work themselves. But Rivers couldn't be bothered. He was either throwing banquets or taking perfumed baths. His servants would brush them off with, "His lordship is busy." Rivers didn't even notice their anger. When someone pointed out the old nobles seemed upset, he waved it off. Those fossils? Still stuck in the past with their fighting and killing. He'd even said publicly, "My grandfather conquered the Snow Kingdom and did all the work for my whole lifetime. I'm northern royalty. All I need to do is eat, drink, and enjoy life. Why would I work myself to death? For who?" Halfway through the banquet, Zachary casually drifted toward the head table with his wine glass and dropped my name. "By the way, has your lordship heard of Louis Calvin?" Rivers paused mid-chew. "Who?" Zachary feigned surprise. "It seems he hasn't paid you a visit or sent any greeting. Nearly every noble in Snow Peak County is here, yet he's nowhere to be seen. Perhaps he thinks this assembly is beneath him." Rivers' smile flickered. Zachary pressed on, lowering his voice just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Word is he was sent north as a discard, a talentless son exiled by his family. Supposedly, he doesn't manage military affairs, doesn't train soldiers, and his forces only exist because the Calvin family props him up. Spends his days in his castle drinking tea and writing poetry. Apparently, even riding a horse hurts his backside." The southern lord snickered. "Noble boys and their delicate ways. Maybe he's planning to show up after the banquet to skip the formalities." Rivers slammed his cup on the table. "Who does this nobody think he is, disrespecting the governor of Snow Peak County?" And just like that, Zachary had painted a target on my back before I'd even arrived. While I was still on my way, Zachary had been busy poisoning Count Rivers against me. He sighed dramatically and told the Count that I didn't understand respect, and that he personally would have come to pay his respects in advance. Rivers was already annoyed, and Zachary's words pushed him over the edge. "This Calvin needs to be taught a lesson," Rivers growled, slamming the table. In his mind, he was already planning to send me to the most dangerous front lines. Zachary smiled to himself. Everything was going exactly as planned. Ever since I'd embarrassed him at his banquet, he'd been burning for payback. By feeding Rivers' ignorance, he could get me killed without lifting a sword. All he had to do was plant the bias and let it grow. He smoothly changed the subject after that, telling hunting stories to lighten the mood. The banquet went back to its usual noise and laughter. Then a servant rushed in and whispered to Rivers, "Lord Calvin and Lord Harvey have arrived." Rivers frowned. Zachary's lips curved. He hadn't expected me to walk right into his trap this easily. "Let him in," Rivers said coldly. "I want to hear his excuse for showing up when the banquet is almost over." The doors opened. Yorn and I walked in together. Behind us, two knights carried heavy burlap sacks on their shoulders. The bags had a faint smell of blood, completely out of place in this glittering hall. Every head turned. The laughter stopped. Rivers stood up from his chair, face dark with anger. "Lewis Calvin, you've truly disappointed me. Arriving late to a banquet like this, with such a disrespectful attitude. Do you not understand basic noble etiquette? And what are those sacks? This is a nobleman's feast, not a street market." The southern lords started whispering and snickering. Some looked delighted, eager to watch me get torn apart. Zachary stepped in right on cue, voice dripping with fake concern. "Lord Rivers is right. A nobleman's banquet reflects everyone's dignity. Did you perhaps think the Count isn't worthy of your presence? Are you deliberately insulting him?" The laughter around the room grew louder. Nobles piled on one after another. "Doesn't even know basic manners. What kind of Calvin family member acts like this? Showing up with dirty sacks at a formal event. Disgraceful." Zachary watched with satisfaction. He'd set the trap perfectly, and I'd supposedly walked right into it. Rivers glared at me, ready to crush me in front of everyone. But I stayed calm, completely unbothered. I gave a proper noble bow and spoke politely. "Count Rivers, I apologize for the delay. I had urgent business on the road. As for the sacks, they contain a gift I prepared especially for you." Zachary scoffed. "A gift? How unexpected. Though for the son of Duke Calvin, shouldn't your gift be a bit more refined? Or is it some wild rabbits from your territory? Go ahead, show us what treasure you've brought." Every word was meant to bury me deeper. Rivers sneered along with him. "Fine, let's see this gift. We Northerners aren't unreasonable." I nodded to my knights. They set the bags down and pulled them open. Heads rolled out onto the polished floor. Snow-sworn heads. Blood dripped across the tiles. The entire hall went dead silent. Every noble froze. Cups stopped midair. Mouths hung open. Rivers stared at the severed heads on the ground, his fat face twisting between terror and shock. His jowls trembled. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. What? What is this?" he finally choked out, voice cracking with panic. The sacks hit the floor, and over 30 bloody heads rolled across the polished tiles of the banquet hall, thudding like heavy stones. Dead silence. Every noble in the room froze mid-motion. Rivers stared at the pile, his throat bobbing. What? What is this?" Zachary's smug smile vanished instantly. He stumbled back half a step, face going pale. I kept my expression calm, like I'd just delivered a routine package. "White Feather Canyon. A snow-sworn elite strike team heading south to attack. We intercepted and eliminated all of them. These are their heads." Zachary recovered fast and pushed back. "That's it. A few barbarian heads. And you think that's worth interrupting the Count's banquet? Or are you just putting on a show to cover for your disrespect?" Rivers jumped on it. "This isn't a military camp. Don't bring your bloody theatrics into my hall." The southern nobles started whispering, throwing skeptical looks my way. "Fake, probably. The Calvin family sure knows how to put on an act." I didn't argue. I just stood there and smiled. Yorn couldn't hold back. He stepped forward and shouted. I saw it with my own eyes. "These are snow-sworn elite fighters. Heavy armor, trained killers. We nearly died out there. While all of you were sitting here drinking and laughing, Lord Calvin was risking his life fighting the enemy." More snickers. "Playing the hero now? This act has gone on long enough." Then an old northern noble walked up slowly. He crouched down, squinted at one of the heads, and his face changed completely. This is Haskell." His voice shook with barely contained fury. "The bastard who hid in the snow forests for years, running night raids. He burned half my estate 3 years ago." Another gray-haired noble cursed under his breath. "My uncle was killed in one of his ambushes. His whole household wiped out. This man should have died a long time ago." The name Haskell sent shockwaves through the room. Northern nobles started reacting, some cursing, some gasping, some with tears in their eyes. Haskell wasn't the strongest warrior in the north, but he was cunning and ruthless. For over a decade, he'd terrorized Snow Peak County with guerrilla raids, killing and burning without mercy. Multiple attempts to catch him had failed, which only made him bolder. And now his head was on the floor of this banquet hall. That's him. I'd recognize that ugly face anywhere. The old noble snarled, staring at the head with vengeful satisfaction. The room went quiet. The mocking stopped. Even Rivers straightened up in his chair, his doubts slowly replaced by shock. Haskell is really dead? This young man did that. At his age, this is remarkable. The northern nobles who'd suffered under Haskell's raids looked at me with completely different eyes now. Shock, respect, even gratitude. Yorn seized the moment and stepped forward again, voice booming. That's right. Lord Lewis led the ambush himself. Killed dozens of enemies. Cut Haskell down personally. Didn't flinch, didn't retreat, even while wounded. He charged into their formation and took down 3 men with 1 sword. Then dragged Haskell off a hillside. I swear on my life, I'll never forget what I saw. Yorn, I said quietly. He shut up immediately. I kept a straight face. Just a small contribution. Nothing worth mentioning. The northern veterans looked at me with genuine respect now. No more contempt. No more waiting to see me humiliated. On the other side, even the southern pioneer lords were whispering, "This guy is the real deal." Zachary told us he was a useless playboy. But some of them glanced at Zachary, then at me, doubt creeping into their eyes. Zachary stood at the edge of the crowd, jaw clenched, fists tight at his sides. He could feel the attention shifting away from him and toward me. The whole evening was supposed to be my humiliation. Instead, it became my stage, and he ended up looking like a fool. He didn't say another word. He just slipped back into the crowd, waiting for another chance. Rivers was furious too, not because he cared about Haskell or appreciated what I'd done. He was angry because I'd stolen his spotlight at his own banquet. Just as he was about to lash out, I turned to him and spoke respectfully. To be honest, this victory belongs mainly to you, Count Rivers. It was your strategic planning and intelligence support that made it possible. Without the scouts you sent ahead to warn us and your tactical guidance, we never could have pulled off that counter-ambush. The room went still. Nobles exchanged confused looks. Rivers blinked. I sent what? He definitely hadn't sent anything. He didn't even know who I was before tonight. But then the gears in his head started turning. Military glory. Admiration from his peers. Credit for a major kill. His brain performed an instant self-edit. His eyes lit up. A proud smile spread across his fat face. Somehow, he now clearly remembered dispatching those scouts himself. He could even recall specific details. Ha ha ha. He slapped his thigh and beamed. That's right. It was all my arrangement. And you certainly didn't let me down. Giving Rivers credit for my victory was a deliberate move. Before arriving at Snow Eagle City, my intelligence system had already told me enough to piece together his personality. Cowardly, vain, self-centered, and desperate to claim glory he didn't earn. Classic narcissist. People like him are easy to handle. Feed their ego and they'll eat out of your hand. Fighting him would gain me nothing. Under the military command structure, all forces in Snow Peak County fell under the 5th Army Corps, and Rivers was the nominal commander. No matter how many enemies I killed, I'd still be serving under this clown unless Duke Edmund said otherwise. So if a few words of flattery bought me more freedom in how my troops were deployed, I'd happily pay that price. Real observers would know who actually did the fighting. After the heads were cleaned away, the mood shifted completely. The southern nobles who'd been mocking me minutes ago came over with wine and fake smiles, calling me impressive and inspiring. They were still wary, but they recognized I was the strongest among the southern pioneers now. Better to stay on my good side. The northern nobles were more honest. An old gray-haired knight raised his glass and said simply, "I lost an entire scout unit to Haskell years ago. Thank you, Lord Calvin." Another nodded and added, "He deserved to die. You did us all a favor." Few words, but genuine. The banquet wound down late. Tomorrow was the real event, the official assembly day, when Rivers would announce the battle plan, troop assignments, and the merit reward system. I woke early the next morning, clear-headed from barely drinking the night before. I opened my daily intelligence system, as usual. 5 updates, all related to the coming war, all immediately useful. First, the Snow Sworn were massing forces. In 7 days, They would send 2,600 boiling blood warriors to attack Snow Eagle City in a massive assault. Their rear base would be left nearly empty. Second, 10 days from now, Snow Eagle City would fall. Rivers would be captured alive and sacrificed. I stared at that one. 3 days. The city would only hold for 3 days after the attack began. That confirmed everything I'd suspected. This place was rotten from the inside. Chaotic command, nobles undermining each other, unfinished walls, messy supplies. No amount of heroism could save it. If the city fell, I wouldn't just lose my chance at military glory, I could lose my life. Staying here means dying alongside these idiots, I muttered. I wasn't a saint. Even if the people of Snow Eagle City begged for help, I wasn't throwing my small force into a hopeless defense. Then I read the third update, and everything clicked. A hidden canyon path along the edge of Clear Feather Mountain Road could bypass the front lines entirely and lead straight to the Snow Sworn's rear base. My eyes lit up. This wasn't just an escape route. It was an opportunity. If the enemy was sending everything south to attack the city, their home base would be wide open. I could slip behind their lines through this secret path and hit them where they were weakest, right when they least expected it. The plan formed itself in my head. Leave before the attack hits. Take the hidden route. Strike the enemy's rear while their main force is busy besieging the city. Drag my feet just enough that Snow Eagle City's fall wouldn't be my responsibility. And when the dust settled, I'd be the hero who boldly attacked the enemy's heart, not the fool who died defending a doomed city. As for Rivers being captured and sacrificed, what a shame, I said with a shrug. Zero sympathy. The city's fall would be blamed on him, the incompetent commander. Meanwhile, I'd walk away clean, the young lord who struck behind enemy lines while everyone else crumbled. The fourth update was interesting too. Viscount Fisher, a quiet, harmless-looking young noble, was secretly feeding intelligence to the Snow Sworn to protect his own territory. Could be useful if I played it right. The fifth, 7 of Duke Edmund's secret agents were embedded in the 5th Army Corps, watching how the nobles performed. Their names were listed. I smiled at that. Observers from the top brass? Perfect. I'll put on a show worth watching, I said, snapping my fingers. Let them see what a real hero looks like. I closed my intelligence panel, washed up, and dressed for the War Council. Dark gold embroidered noble attire, polished boots, sword belt across my chest. If I was going to play the young hero, I needed to look the part. Walking through camp, I noticed knights and officers glancing my way with respect or curiosity. Word of last night's Snow Sworn heads had spread through the entire 5th Army Corps overnight. The Central Command tent was massive. A round sand table covered in tactical maps and terrain models sat in the middle, surrounded by rings of high-backed chairs that were nearly all filled. Thanks to my performance last night, I'd earned a seat in the innermost ring. Rivers was slumped in the head chair, face flushed, half asleep, clearly still recovering from last night's drinking. The man actually running things was Viscount Webster, a silver-haired, powerfully built old soldier in an old-style military uniform. He was the Rivers family's most senior vassal and the only transcendent knight in all of Snow Peak County. Even aged, he was far stronger than any elite knight. The moment he stepped in, the room went serious. Welcome to the 5th Army Corps pre-battle council for the campaign against the Snow Sworn, he began. The room was clearly split. Northern veterans sat stone-faced. Southern pioneers whispered among themselves. I spotted several of Duke Edmund's secret observers scattered through the crowd, watching silently. Webster unrolled a scroll and read out the military merit rewards. First-class merit, killing enemy leaders or destroying their main force. 5,000 gold coins and 300 square kilometers of northern territory. Second class, capturing enemy strongholds or killing important commanders. 2,000 gold coins and 100 square kilometers. Third class, supporting the main battle or scouting achievements. 500 gold coins, war horses, armor, and priority supply rights. Special merit would be determined on a case-by-case basis. And at the bottom, anyone who retreated, disobeyed, or acted deceptively would lose all merit, face prosecution, and have their territory confiscated. The tent buzzed with whispered excitement. 300 square kilometers was the size of a baron's domain. 5,000 gold coins could fund a territory for a year. Duke Edmund was clearly serious about wiping out the Snow Sworn. I sat still, tapping my armrest, keeping my face neutral. But inside, I was calculating fast. 300 square kilometers would double Red Tide territory's size. If I pulled off my surprise rear attack and then staged a dramatic, turning the tide moment, second-class merit was guaranteed. With some additional fighting after that, first class wasn't out of reach. Webster set down the scroll and moved to enemy intelligence. He pointed at 3 red marks on the sand table map of Snow Peak County. These vermin hide in the shadows. Find one, there's a nest nearby. Show any weakness, they'll crawl out and bite. His tone was calm, but his descriptions were vivid. 3 confirmed snow-sworn activity zones. 1 near Snow Shadow Highlands in the northern mountains, 1 around Clear Feather Ridge where scouts kept disappearing, and 1 near the Ice Tooth Mine where an old mining site had shown suspicious activity for the past 6 months. They don't fight fair, Webster continued. They live in caves and tree hollows, move at night, play dead during the day, and love fake retreats and ambush traps. They're not many, but they always hit where it hurts. Every one of their warriors is stronger than an apprentice knight thanks to their suicide techniques, and a few are close to transcendent level. If you expect them to line up for an honorable battle, you'd better have your coffin ready first. The old northern nobles nodded grimly. Some of the young southern lords scoffed quietly. Just bandits. Nothing to worry about. Until Webster's razor-sharp gaze swept across them, and they shut up instantly. Rivers stirred in his chair, eyelids fluttering, and managed to fake being awake for a few seconds before drifting off again. I studied the second red point on the map, Clear Feather Ridge. That was the location from my 3rd intelligence update this morning. The hidden canyon path that could bypass the front lines and strike the snow-sworn's rear. A plan was already taking shape in my head. Clear Feather Ridge was a natural fortress, nearly impossible to attack head-on. But with the secret path, I could slip around the side, hit their base when most of their fighters had marched south to attack Snow Eagle City, and then ambush any forces trying to rush back to defend. The pieces were falling into place perfectly. After Webster finished explaining the enemy positions, the tent went quiet as everyone waited for the battle plan. Webster proposed the safest approach. Hit the Ice Tooth Mine area first since the terrain was flattest, then use it as a base to push toward the other 2 positions one at a time. The old northern nobles nodded in agreement. Then a slurred voice cut in from the head chair. "Why are you dragging your feet, old man?" Rivers had somehow hauled himself upright, still reeking of last night's wine. He stabbed his fat finger at all 3 red dots on the sand table. "Hit all 3 at once. We've got 5,000 troops. What's there to be scared of?" Everyone exchanged awkward glances. Nobody knew what to say. Rivers' advisor coughed and tried to smooth it over. "What Lord Rivers means is we could send 3 separate forces to clear all 3 sites simultaneously, potentially ending the campaign faster." Webster's face darkened. "Split our limited forces 3 ways? That's suicide. The Snow-sworn specialize in ambushes. Every one of those locations is dangerous. This isn't a game." That set Rivers off. He slammed the table and stood up. "Am I the commander, or are you? You're a vassal. How dare you talk back to your lord in front of everyone?" Normally Rivers would never speak to Webster like this. The old Viscount had been his father's right hand, a transcendent knight, the most respected figure in Snow Peak County. But tonight Rivers was drunk, and liquid courage does ugly things. Webster's face went iron gray, like he'd been slapped in public. But he held his tongue. He was the vassal. Rivers was the lord. Even a drunk, incompetent lord couldn't be humiliated in front of the entire command staff. The silence was suffocating. Rivers staggered to the sand table and pounded the 3 red points. All 3, at the same time. Pick some southern pioneers and a few of those eager northern nobles. Send them as the vanguard. I'll stay here in Snow Eagle City and command from headquarters. When he said, "command from headquarters," his voice actually rose with pride, like he genuinely believed he was some brilliant strategist directing a masterful campaign from the rear. Nobody spoke. A few embarrassed coughs. The sound of candle wax popping. Every noble in the room could see exactly what was happening. They were being sent out as cannon fodder while the fat count sat safely behind the walls. I leaned back in my chair and watched the whole performance with cold eyes. All I could think about was this morning's 2nd intelligence update. In 10 days, this city falls, and this man gets sacrificed. A dead man talking. But his stupidity actually solved a problem for me. I'd been trying to figure out how to volunteer for a mission without looking suspicious. A young noble eagerly requesting frontline duty would raise questions. But now Rivers was randomly assigning people to dangerous tasks. All I had to do was step forward at the right moment. Lord Rivers. Viscount Webster. I raised my hand. If possible, I'd like to lead my forces to clear Feather Ridge for reconnaissance. The terrain there is complex, narrow mountain passes, tight valleys. I have experience fighting in similar environments from my recent engagement. I know how to set up alert lines and plan retreat routes. If we can confirm enemy positions first, we'll have much better odds when the main force moves in. The tent went dead silent. Heads turned toward me. Eyes went wide. They couldn't believe it. The young lord who'd just made a name for himself was volunteering to go deep into enemy territory? Couldn't he see this was a death sentence? From the back row, Yorn's hand shot up instantly. I'm going too. Wherever Lord Calvin goes, I go. Whispers rippled through the room. Are they insane? Clear Feather Ridge? That's suicide. Can't they see it's a trap assignment? Everyone knew this wasn't a scouting mission. It was expendable duty. Webster stared at me for a long time, his expression unreadable. I could tell he was trying to figure me out. Was I reckless? Arrogant after killing Haskell? Or did I have some hidden plan? In the end, it didn't matter to him. If a few hundred soldiers bought him time to reign in Rivers' insanity, it was worth it. Very well, he said, voice steady as always. Lord Calvin and Lord Harvey will lead their forces to clear Feather Ridge. Remember, reconnaissance only. Do not engage recklessly. Understood, I said with a bow. Then Webster casually assigned a few other low-ranking Southern pioneers to scout the other two enemy positions. Their faces went white instantly. Everyone knew scouting was just a polite word for walking into a minefield. But nobody dared refuse. Some even silently blamed me. If I hadn't volunteered, they wouldn't have been picked. The meeting didn't last much longer after that. Webster rattled off some logistics arrangements and dismissed everyone. As the nobles filed out, not a single face looked happy. The entire 5th Army Corps was being led by a drunk fool who thought commanding from headquarters meant napping in a castle while everyone else died. Which, according to my intelligence system, was exactly what was going to happen. I stood at the edge of camp and looked over my assembled force. 20 elite knights, 50 full knights, 103 apprentice knights, and 400 infantry. That was everything I was taking to clear Feather Ridge. My Red Tide territory troops were solid, well-trained, high morale, loyal to the bone. Months of hard work had built that. Yorn's contribution surprised me. His silver-trimmed light armor stood out in the crowd, and behind him was a respectable force of well-equipped knights and soldiers. Count Harvey clearly wasn't going to let his youngest son die without proper protection. Mixed into my column were a few unfamiliar faces that Webster had inserted. No family crests, but obviously old northern military stock. Their real job wasn't support, it was watching me. I spotted them immediately. One in particular caught my attention, an elite knight named Bond. Silent, cold-faced, hand never leaving his sword. He looked nothing like the spy from the movies. Honestly, he was pretty ugly. But thanks to my intelligence system, I knew he was one of the governor's secret agents. If I did anything that could be considered treason, he had the authority to execute me on the spot. I quietly told Lambert and the other elite knights to keep an eye on him, just in case. While I was organizing the formation, Yorn sidled up and shooed everyone away. So, boss, why did you volunteer for Clear Feather Ridge? He whispered. I couldn't exactly tell him about my intelligence system. Instinct, I said. Felt like there was an opportunity. Yorn nodded slowly with a knowing look. You've got someone inside the Snow Sworn, don't you? I blinked. What? Think about it. You knew exactly where I was when you rescued me. You knew Haskell would come through that canyon. Now you're picking Clear Feather Ridge specifically. He was getting more excited with every word. You planted a spy in their organization. Boss, that's brilliant. I stared at him, not sure whether to laugh or sigh, but I didn't bother correcting him. Let him believe whatever made sense to him. He patted his chest happily. Maybe I'll get a share of the glory this time, too. The horn sounded. I mounted my horse, scanned the ranks one last time, and raised my hand. Move out. Destination, Clear Feather Ridge, far to the north. While my column marched through morning light, something much darker was happening. Before dawn, in the heavy snow fog around Snow Shadow Highlands, The snow sworn from all 3 bases in Snow Peak County had gathered into one massive force. A twisted black totem pole stood in the center of the wasteland. On the platform before it stood Barnes, one of the 8 elders of the Snow Sworn and a founding member. He wore ice wolf fur, red war markings running from his forehead to his chest, a great frost axe at his feet. He was a surviving noble of the old Snow Kingdom, one of the few who escaped when the Empire burned the Snow capital and slaughtered its people. He was fiercely loyal to Hero, the Snow Sworn leader, and regarded him as the last hope of the old royal bloodline. This time Hero had personally ordered Barnes to take Snow Eagle City. Failure was not an option. Below him stood thousands of warriors, not a rabble, but hardened survivors. Rough beast hide armor, cold iron plates, weapons bearing the marks of countless fights. The front ranks formed shield and spear formations with bone-tipped lances. Behind them were wolf riders on massive snow wolves with glowing blue eyes. And the most terrifying unit, the Mad Wolf Corps, elite among elites, wrapped in black cloth and bone plates, faces painted with the mark of their ancient god. No flags, no drums, but perfect, eerie discipline. Priests knelt before the totem, chanting in the old Snow Kingdom language, cursing the Empire, mourning their fallen nation. Warriors beat their chests and roared in response, each wave louder than the last. Barnes held up a broken old badge, the Snow Kingdom's crest, then dropped it to the frozen ground. We had a country, a capital, a king. The Iron Blood Empire destroyed it all, burned our homes, killed our families, crushed our dignity under their iron hooves. His eyes turned cold. We are the Snow Sworn, not rebels, survivors of a dead nation. And now the southern invaders want to finish us off. He gripped his frost axe and pointed it south. This time, we strike first. We take Snow Eagle City, blood for blood. The warriors sliced their fingers and let blood drip onto the ground before the totem, a pledge of their commitment to destroying the Empire. Then came the sacrifice. Captured imperial nobles and knights hung upside down over an ice altar, mouths gagged, blood seeping from their wounds into carved channels. The priest chanted. The ground trembled. A crawling sound rose from below. The prisoners' bodies shriveled, black blood pouring from their eyes and ears, until nothing remained but dried husks. Blue fire ignited atop the totem. The priest declared, "The god has given permission." The warriors erupted in a roar that tore through the silence. Barnes raised his axe towards Snow Eagle City. March, no banners, no war drums. A black tide of warriors moved silently through the snow and wind, heading straight for Snow Eagle City. And I was already gone, marching the other way, toward the base they'd left behind. Cold night wind cut through the mountain valley like a blade. I led my troops onto a narrow hidden path toward Clear Feather Ridge. The trail was so tight we had to go single file, everyone dismounted, pulling their horses by the reins along cliff edges. How is there even a path here? Yearn panted, glancing down at the drop below. It's not on any map, old smuggler's route. A hunter told me about it, I said casually, and kept walking. Behind me, Bond, the governor's secret agent, was watching everything closely. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. He was noticing things. My soldiers' equipment was practical and clean, designed for real combat. The formation stayed tight, even on this terrible terrain. When I gave an order, every soldier responded instantly, down to the last man in the rear guard. This wasn't some thrown-together noble's army. This was a trained fighting force. I walked at the very front without servants or escorts, checking the terrain myself, leading the column through every turn and fork without hesitation. I knew Bond was wondering how I could navigate a path that didn't exist on any military map, one that looked completely untouched, as if I'd walked it 100 times before. I also noticed him frowning at our supply train, which was deliberately moving slower than the main column. I was dragging my feet on purpose, buying time, but I didn't need him figuring that out. Then 2 scouts came galloping back and dropped to their knees. Report. Snow Sworn outpost detected 3 miles ahead. Approximately 200 defenders, I nodded calmly. 200. We can take them. Get me their defensive layout, patrol routes, and surrounding terrain. Yes, sir. They remounted and vanished. Bond's eyebrows went up. He murmured something to himself. I knew what he was thinking. This outpost had been a thorn in the governor's side for years. Clear Feather Ridge sat at a critical choke point between Snow Peak County and IC County. Whoever controlled it controlled the Snow Sworn's main retreat and reinforcement route. The military had tried to take it several times and failed because it was too well hidden and too easy to defend. If I captured it, that was first-class merit at minimum. But I could also tell Bond was doing the math. A strategic position like this, and only 200 defenders? Where were the rest? He was getting a bad feeling. And he was right too. That same night, back in Snow Eagle City, the party was still going when a scout burst through the banquet hall doors. Report. Large Snow Sworn cavalry force approaching Snow Eagle City. Estimated over 1,000 riders. Rivers nearly dropped his wine. 1,000? The scout repeated himself. Impossible. Rivers staggered to his feet. We're supposed to be attacking them. How are they coming for us? Before anyone could answer, another messenger rushed in. Viscount Webster is on the walls. He's asking for you immediately. Webster was already on the north wall, staring into the darkness. A black wave was rolling across the snow toward the city, snow-sworn wolf riders. Massive snow wolves sprinting in eerie silence, kicking up clouds of snow dust. The riders wore beast hides and scale armor, gleaming silver in the moonlight. Every mount was packed with muscle, blue eyes glowing, fangs bared. Wolf cavalry, Webster said quietly. A young knight next to him gripped his weapon. Only a few hundred. Webster shook his head. That's the vanguard. There are more behind them. He tightened his grip on his sword. They're going to siege the city. Nobles came scrambling up the stairs, shoving onto the walls, panic spreading like fire. They're attacking us? Why wasn't there any warning? Can we even hold this city? Rivers clutched the battlements, voice shaking. What? What do we do? Webster stood unmoved in the wind and snow, eyes cold and steady. Concentrate archers and spearmen on the north wall. Move several hundred knights into position. We hold the first wave, and somewhere behind the enemy lines, I was about to hit their empty nest. Back at Snow Eagle City, things were falling apart exactly as my intelligence system predicted. Barnes and his snow-sworn army reached the city overnight and surrounded it on 3 sides, leaving only a narrow gap on the west. They didn't attack immediately. They were preparing something. The nobles gathered for another emergency meeting. The mood was nothing like the last one. No wine, no laughter, no flattery. Rivers sat in his chair like a frightened quail, barely breathing. Webster, in full armor, took charge. They have around 2,000 fighters, but we still have the advantage, he said. We have 2,000 defenders and over 1,000 capable knights. We could win a direct fight, but I recommend we hold the walls instead. He'd already sent for help from Duke Edmund, but reinforcements would take 10 days. The city had enough food and strong defenses. They just needed to hold out. Then came the troop assignments. Webster put the Southern Pioneer Lords on the south wall, the oldest, weakest section, the most likely point of attack. He gave the northern nobles the safer positions near the grain stores and inner city, claiming they knew the terrain better. Every southerner in the room saw through it. They were being used as meat shields. But nobody dared object. The northern nobles just nodded quietly, and Rivers pretended he hadn't heard anything. After the meeting, the southern lords walked out with dark faces, muttering bitterly among themselves. But their complaints stayed quiet. That night, something worse began. Nobles started secretly preparing escape routes, checking saddles, bribing guards at the gates, scouting underground tunnels and drainage exits. The city hadn't fallen yet, but the people defending it were already planning to run. Meanwhile, I was doing something very different. Under cover of darkness, I ordered over 100 red-tide knights to move silently along the mountain paths and close in on the snow-sworn camp from behind. My scouts had already mapped every patrol route. I picked the weakest point in their perimeter and punched straight through. The forward teams hit first. Fire oil splashed, flaming arrows launched. Tents erupted in flames. The rear of the camp dissolved into chaos instantly. Lambert led the spearhead, 10 elite knights racing like a red comet straight for the enemy command tent. The snow-sworn commander burst out with his battle axe, barely awake. Attack? How did they find? Lambert's sword was already swinging. The commander blocked it, and the collision of aura shook the whole tent off its poles. He was strong, I could see that, but it didn't matter. 10 of my best knights closed in from every angle. The commander fought hard, his axe cleaving through the air, pushing two of them back. But they worked together like a machine. Lambert struck from the front. Two knights slashed his shoulders from the flanks. Then a lance punched through his chest from behind. His axe clattered to the ground. He died with disbelief frozen on his face. Outside, my knights split into small teams and tore through the camp like streams of fire, setting everything ablaze. I made sure the important targets, grain stores, weapons caches, treasure, were seized and guarded, not burned. Everything else went up in flames. With their commander dead and his deputy killed before he could even get dressed, the Snowsworn had no leadership left. Warriors stumbled through the dark, some in full armor, some barefoot, screaming and running in every direction. Enemy attack. Where? Behind us. No, the north side too. Nobody could figure out how many of us there were or where we were coming from. My squads kept hitting and pulling back, striking one section, then vanishing before the enemy could react. By the time they turned to fight, the next camp over was already burning. Then my main cavalry force charged out from the tree line, 30 riders per squad, smashing through the densest clusters of defenders. The Snowsworn tried to form battle lines, but were scattered before they could even get into position. Soldiers ran, tripped over bodies, fled into the forest, only to be cut down by my knights waiting in the shadows. The entire camp looked like it had been swallowed by hell. The ground was stained red, mud mixing with blood, fire reflecting off everything. I stood beside a burning watchtower, flames dancing in my eyes. "The hunt has begun," I said quietly. The night settled over Clear Feather Ridge. Fires still flickered among the wreckage, lighting up blood-stained snow. It was over. My divide-and-conquer tactics worked perfectly. We tore the Snowsworn force into isolated pockets and destroyed them one by one. It wasn't really a battle. It was a slaughter. Yorn's knights lacked real combat experience, but I assigned them to the outer perimeter under my rider's guidance. Their job was simple: catch anyone trying to run. They formed patrol lines around the battlefield edges and cut down every escapee. Still, the Snowsworn weren't pushovers. Some activated boiling blood in their final moments and caused real damage before going down. A handful managed to break through and flee north, carrying news of the defeat with them. But it didn't matter anymore. Clear Feather Ridge had fallen. My total losses, 18 knights. The Snowsworn garrison was virtually wiped out. A textbook night raid. Precise, clean, devastating. Of course, without that hidden path and the cover of darkness, even with 3 times the troops, I'd have been dragged into a grinding fight I might not have won. Bond stood in the ruined camp, staring around in disbelief. "It's done," he muttered. This outpost had been Duke Edmund's headache for years. Multiple attempts to take it had all failed, and I'd captured it in a single night, without even a proper face-to-face battle. He looked at me as I stood on the high ground, giving clean-up orders to my knights, calm as if nothing special had happened. I caught him whispering to himself. A true young hero, Yorn appeared at my side, grinning so wide his face could barely contain it. "I count as having contributed, right? My name will be in the report." He'd barely fought, just blocked a few fleeing enemies with his knights, stumbled into victory by standing next to me. But he was thrilled, already rubbing his hands together. Clinging to my coattails was paying off exactly as he'd hoped. We searched the camp thoroughly afterward. The haul was impressive: grain stores, dried meat, leather, arrows, looted gold and silver, coins, wool rolls, even old Snow Kingdom currency. We also found several thick tactical manuals wrapped in waterproof oilcloth, perfectly preserved. The Snowsworn weren't just bandits. They studied and trained seriously. But the most interesting find was a mirror, cracked and set in a black obsidian frame. Its fractured surface gave off an eerie blue glow. "The Mist Veil mirror," Bond said, his voice heavy. "So that's how they kept evading every raid. This thing creates illusions." I touched the frame. "What exactly does it do?" "From a distance, it projects false images, makes a camp look empty or like ruins. But it only works for about 15 minutes at a time, can't cover a large area, and anyone within a few dozen meters can see through it, like a mirage generator." My mind was already racing. "This is a very useful find," I said quietly. I turned to look at the valley, still smoldering. "The Snowsworn will discover this base is lost soon. They'll send scouts, maybe a force to retake it." I paused. "If we use this mirror to make this place look like burned-out ruins, And hide a unit here. A faint smile crossed my face. We wait for them to walk right into our trap. The mirror was carefully wrapped and stored in an iron chest. Later that night, Bond sat alone in his tent writing a formal report to Duke Edmund. He detailed everything. How I led the flanking maneuver through the hidden path, how I split the enemy forces, how my knights coordinated like a single unit. He documented the Mist Veil mirror and warned that the Snow Sworn would likely attempt to retake the position, requesting reinforcements to hold it. At the bottom of the letter, he added something personal, something he told me later he rarely did in official reports. Lord Calvin's command ability and tactical insight far exceed what his age and experience would suggest. With proper support, he could become a pillar of the North's future. He tied the letter to a swift-winged bird, a small messenger beast used by the Imperial military, fast enough to outrun most tracking, and sent it into the night sky. Meanwhile, back in Snow Eagle City, things were getting worse. The Snow Sworn had already launched probing attacks on the first day of the siege, using fog and darkness to rattle the defenders' nerves. Webster had stayed on the walls all night. But the real problem wasn't the enemy outside. It was the people inside. The noble forces had zero coordination. They ignored orders, delayed reinforcements, and dragged their feet on everything. The Northern veterans mostly listened to Webster, but the Southern pioneers gave lip service and then did whatever they pleased. Webster knew he wasn't meant to be a commander. Under the old Count Rivers, his job was simple: charge and kill. He never had to think about strategy or politics. Now he was stuck in a role that didn't fit him, propping up an incompetent lord, trying to hold together an army that was already falling apart from the inside. He stood on the wall staring at the gray horizon, and I could imagine his thoughts were just as bleak. While I was securing Clear Feather Ridge, Snow Eagle City was falling apart. On the second night, the Snow Sworn hit the south wall hard. The small noble garrison there was wiped out before anyone could respond. By the time Webster charged in with reinforcements, the wall was a slaughterhouse, bodies hanging from battlements, blood running down the stone steps. Not a single defender left alive. Webster fought like a demon, his blade cleaving through snow-sworn warriors, and his knights barely managed to take the wall back. By morning, rumors were already spreading through the city. The South garrison is gone. The Snow Sworn broke through. That noble commander ran. He was a traitor. Morale was crumbling. Webster didn't even get to rest before the next assault came. That evening, the Snow Sworn brought up siege weapons and aimed them at the north gate. But they weren't throwing rocks. Curse bombs. Black projectiles arced through the sky, trailing dark smoke, then exploded into clouds of foul, corrosive fog. The stuff ate through armor, dissolved wood, rotted flesh. Soldiers screamed and collapsed. Dozens of these bombs hammered the north gate in waves, turning the entire defensive line into a toxic nightmare. Archers collapsed from the poison. The walls themselves started dissolving. Even corpses melted. Commands contradicted each other. Some officers screamed to retreat, others screamed to hold. Only the old Northern Knight squad stayed on the walls, standing in the poison with bloodshot eyes, watching their comrades fall beside them, but refusing to give ground. Webster rushed to the north gate, still wounded from the previous fight. He ordered reinforcements pulled from the east and south walls. The messengers came back one by one, faces blank. Lord So-and-so refuses to send troops. Says he must hold his own section. Lord such-and-such claims heavy casualties. Cannot spare anyone. Webster stood motionless, staring into the rolling black fog. These nobles had already decided this city wasn't worth dying for. They were saving their strength for their own escape. Then the worst news arrived. A guard stumbled up the stairs, blood-soaked and trembling. The west gate. Someone opened a gap. What? People saw there were no enemies on that side. They thought they could get out. Before he finished, another rider came crashing in, screaming. The west gate is a trap. They let people through on purpose. Ambush outside. Hundreds killed. Those fools, Webster roared, slamming his fist into the stone wall so hard his knuckles split open. Here's what happened. The Snow Sworn had deliberately left the west side of their encirclement looking empty. The Southern pioneer nobles saw their chance. Without telling anyone, they gathered their personal knight squads and made a run for it. Why stay? The Northerners don't consider us their own people anyway. Protect your own strength first. That's what nobles do. Several hundred riders slipped out through the west gate into the dark, empty wasteland beyond. It looked safe. No enemy in sight. Then red dots lit up in the darkness. Hundreds of eyes glowing like predators in the night. Horns blasted from every direction. Snow-sworn warriors erupted from under the snow, surrounding them completely. The lead riders were cut down by arrow volleys before they could even scream. Horses crashed into each other as the rear tried to turn back. Wolf riders on massive snow wolves tore through the chaos, claws ripping armor, fangs crushing throats. Some knelt and begged for mercy. Some shouted surrender. The snow-sworn didn't care. They killed every last one they could reach, mechanically, relentlessly, like they were washing away a stain. The screaming faded into the wind and snow. Out of the hundreds who fled, fewer than 10 made it out alive. The escape turned into a massacre, and the West Gate breach left the entire city's defense line weakened even further. Everything was happening exactly as my intelligence system had predicted. Snow Eagle City was dying, and I was nowhere near it.